Hey Insiders, Frank Pitsikalis on the podcast today, the spa industry's king of data. Frank sees sales, margin, booking information for thousands of spas across the United States. Today we're going to talk about what the smartest spas are doing to boost profitability, the tactics they're using to do it, and how they're rolling it out with their teams and customers. So much value in this one, guys. Hope you enjoy. Frank, I am so excited. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I feel like you have such a singular view into this industry. You started ResortSuite, which became the dominant platform in the market, was acquired by Agilysys, and there is the CMO and helming product development, right?
I'm SVP of product strategy, yes.
So I feel like you are in this very unique position where you have access to data from thousands of spas across the country. And you just have this behind the curtain view into the economics of this industry that feels singular.
Yeah, we work with so many different customers, and there's so many things, so many insights you can gain from seeing what they do well, what they don't do well, and so many blind spots and missed opportunities where you can really make small adjustments but could have a huge impact.
What would one of those be?
Just looking at your menu mix and looking at what treatments you make available at certain times. You just change when things are available. It has a huge impact.
That's so intelligent, but I haven't really heard that talked about, especially within the day spa, med spa segment.
I did a presentation at iSpa in 2006.
Really?
20 years ago, and introduced the concept of revenue management for spas. I was thinking airlines do it, right? And actually I had images of airplane seats and pricing and how they do it to share that information with spa operators about how you should be thinking about your business. You think of hotels, you're not going to go to some luxury resort that you have close to your home and expect that every day of the year would be the same price and same availability. Whereas with spas, traditionally they've done very little with actually revenue managing their spas, just making good decisions about how they should price, if they should do dynamic pricing. And then there's also the concept of dynamic availability, which I've been a big proponent of.
What is dynamic availability?
So dynamic availability is changing the mix of what's available during peak times. If I was to actually restrict, let's say, a wax treatment during a peak time, I can still take it at, let's say, late in the day or early in the day, which times might otherwise go unsold. So now you've filled those spots, and what you've done is you've protected the high demand times to make sure you're selling your highest margin treatments, maybe your signature massage. Those types of treatments are now being booked at those higher price levels, higher margins. Overall, the effect of it is just a better mix of what you're selling to optimize revenue. Now, dynamic pricing, whenever you talk about revenue management in spas, they always think about, oh, well, we can't change the price on the guest. In fact, now the ones that have like Marriott, Four Seasons, a lot of brands that have been doing some really good work around dynamic pricing, they've seen a real uplift and no resistance at all from guests.
Interesting. So the staff is hesitant, but when it actually comes to the market pushing back on it, there's nothing.
If I can get that massage 2:00 on a Saturday, I'll pay the extra $100 for the service to get that prime time. So they understand there's that supply and demand. And just like airlines, car rentals, hotels, they all employ revenue management. They couldn't operate without it. Whereas spas, we've been a little bit behind the times. And like I said, in order to deal with that apprehension about dynamic pricing, I really try to talk about dynamic availability, because then you're not changing the price. You're just changing what's available. Like John, my wife's a hairstylist in Toronto, really sought after. If she was to fill her day with blowouts, right? If she just did that all day, first of all, she wouldn't make any money, and neither would the salon. But if she said, for a few key customers, I'll take one or two of those services during the day, but then the rest are color and cuts and larger treatments. So even there, they're adjusting the mix of what they're booking to maximize margin and maximize revenue.
I love this. And I think that what you're describing is almost more necessary for even a solo operator than a large business, because otherwise, I mean, you only have a finite amount of hours in your day.
Right.
And so you're having a hard revenue cap. And if you're not pulling this lever, it feels just like a major missed opportunity.
It absolutely is. It's a blind spot, and most spas miss it. If I just thoughtfully change the mix of what's available, If I just did some really simple math and said, if I sold more of these services during this time and not these types of treatments, what would that impact on my overall revenue? So it's actually a pretty straightforward thing to do. In fact, you can do both. You can actually have dynamic pricing. So still those signature treatments might go up by $100. But if you also employ at the same time dynamic availability, it's a double effect, right? Because now you're also restricting what's available. And now those things that are available are at a higher price. And then I think the third thing I would say from just overall revenue optimization is what we call minimum gap restriction.
What is that?
That's where when you look at a spa day, at the end of the day, and you might have been sold out, but when you actually looked at the schedule, there's white space everywhere. And that's because they've been booked suboptimally, right? A guest calls for a 90-minute treatment. You might have a 2-hour opening. You take that 90-minute treatment, it'll leave a 30-minute gap. You may not even have services that can fill that gap. So it goes unsold time. Whereas if you just had either through technology or other approaches, some spas do this themselves. They actually train their team to say, don't book a 90 in a 2-hour spot, book a 60, because then you can fit another 60 right after it. Now we're back to back to back.
Mm-hmm.
So we're using AI technology that plays Tetris with the schedule. So today there's all kinds of channels that guests can book at through an app, online, through the phones, calling in directly to a spa. So the ability through all of those channels to be able to minimize any gap restrictions, I think is really important.
So there you're training the staff to say, okay, I don't want to call this massage therapist in 3 hours before the next block of business. Are they not booking it all together? Or are they offering the optimal time first and leading with that?
Yeah, they'll offer other times where that service would fit either back to back, or what we do is we let you set a minimum gap setting. So you might say 60 minutes. So that would need 60 minutes either before or after the treatment in order to accept that booking. And if it doesn't, and it's leaving 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, you may not want the system to let that treatment be available. Now, they might find it at a different part in the schedule, but that 2-hour block is now protected because it's waiting for a 60. And it may not be that guest, it may be another guest. There's ways that you can also recommend to them, say, well, we can't fit a 90. We could accommodate a 60-minute service. So now they book a shorter service, but now you're going to also ensure that you'll be able to take another treatment. So it's just about optimizing. At the end of the day, like you said, John, spas are selling time. So how can we optimize the time, make sure we minimize those situations where there's unsold time because we just can't fit anything in there? And then if you also use revenue management, dynamic pricing, dynamic availability, you're now really operating it optimally.
So what have you seen in terms of bottom line performance from spas that go from doing none of these three things to all of them?
Yeah, we did a little example where I'm making $100 of margin on one type of service, $50 on another, and $25 on another. And we did a model where we said on one treatment room, if you didn't have any of this turned on, this kind of the distribution that you would normally see, just by turning on the restriction to say, don't book those low margin treatments during my highest demand times, it automatically doubled the profit.
Wow.
Right? From $275 for that full day to $550. And then if you said, other than our highest margin services, we want to protect that time, it actually boosted that to $700. That's one treatment room for the day. If you take 10 treatment rooms, that's $7,000 versus $2,750 if you didn't have anything turned on. And that's all bottom line. So anything you're doing here where you're etching out additional profit, it's going right to the bottom line because you've already baked in your service provider costs, the cost of your real estate and your FF&E and everything else, your fixed cost. So now any additional profit you make per minute is pure profit.
And I bet the team loves it too because they're getting a more consistent stream of tips.
Exactly.
That's phenomenal. So are there any other areas outside of revenue management that you see is either huge missed opportunities or profit leaks for spas?
Again, if we go back and not just look at margin, but also look at the propensity for somebody to buy retail. So, for example, going back to that wax treatment, you do the wax treatment, you make a certain amount of profit. But if I sell this type of facial, typically it also drags along on average, X amount of dollars of additional retail revenue, because people want to use what you used on their face, right? They're like, oh, I really love how my face feels and everything else. I want to now continue that regimen at home. So just looking at the effect of not just how much money you make on each service, but what are the ancillary effects from a retail perspective and other types of revenue that you might incur, even add-on revenue that the guest may not have added aromatherapy to a massage or a hot stone, but that's something you can add in the treatment room while the guest is in treatment. You can say, you might have hot stones like sitting there ready and say, for $25, I can upgrade your treatment to a hot stone. That is pure profit. Again, goes right to the bottom line, because as soon as you close that door, you've already locked in your profit for that service, your cost and everything else. So if I add $25, that literally goes right to the bottom line. And what I've seen spas do is incent their staff to say, if you sell that add-on in treatment, we will give you 50% commission, because we both just made a whole bunch of money, right? And so it's not on the entire treatment, but for add-ons, just incent them to provide that additional enhancement to their treatment. And they also make a little bit of money too. So
I love that. Are there areas of the spa that the profitability is contingent upon selling add-ons?
it's always a good thing, right? You might bake it into your price so that you don't have to rely on add-ons, because then you're asking your therapist to sell, which sometimes doesn't work that well. But you should price your treatments accordingly. Like I said, a lot of spas, they don't really move the needle on their price. And some see that by raising the price, guests don't complain about it at all. And then they're like, why don't we raise the price at all times if the guest's willing to pay that? We've got to be careful, because if you raise it too much, then you start the diminishing returns, right? But I think also when you think of revenue management, it's not always about how much more money can you make. It's also about how can we open up spa to a larger demographic? Because traditionally we've always marketed spa or been able to penetrate, let's say 25% of consumers that have ever experienced spa. And that stays about pretty static. But when you think of airlines, when they introduced revenue management, when rates were regulated in the late 70s, there weren't that many people that had flown in an airplane, right? Because it was a set price and everything else. But as soon as they brought in deregulation, which allowed them to charge whatever they wanted, now all of a sudden you could get a flight the last minute from New York to LA for $99. And so now you're all of a sudden opening up the opportunity through revenue management for many more people to enjoy air travel. Now it's hard to find anybody that's never been on an airplane, right? Same thing can happen for spas. If we, on an idle Tuesday, we might offer a massage at a much lower rate than we would on a busy Friday or Saturday.
I love that perspective. So you're saying that dynamic pricing, instead of viewing it as exploitative, it becomes a lever where the spa can actually afford to make it accessible to people who wouldn't otherwise be able to engage with it, and net out a lot more profit in the end.
Absolutely. And then if your consumer also knows that I can come in during periods that you don't have demand and I can get a better price, you're going to start filling that lower demand time, because now all of a sudden people will come in on a Tuesday. If I'm a teacher and I know that I can come and get a massage on a Tuesday evening, I'll do that.
I love that. Now, given that you see a lot of data every day, is there a metric that you think spas, especially spas that are smaller, that may not be obvious to pay attention to, but that you think has a disproportionate value if you're really keeping your eye on it?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you just break it down to a profit per minute, like you should probably look at each one of your treatments, do a breakdown of the average cost based on my therapist's cost and everything else, and look at your profit per minute, and then look at your revenue per staff hour, right? So that maybe if you shrink the amount of time that they're working, but they're more fully utilized, it might be a win-win, right? It might be lower cost and you're driving more revenues. And whatever it is, have a benchmark and measure yourself against it so you know how well you're doing. Some just look at top line numbers at the end of the week or the month, and by then it's way too late to have made an impact on your results.
I like that a lot. And if you could advise a small business to take one step, to try one of the things that we talked about today, what would be the most high impact?
It'd probably be dynamic availability. Look at your menu and just say, what are the things that we're just not going to want to sell on a day like this or a certain part of the day. That's not easy. Not all software can do that. So it's not the easiest for some of the smaller operators that may not have those features in their system. But when you're a small operator, I want to be clear, it may not be, oh, this is good for the big guys or something like that. As a small operator, it's even more important because you actually have a limited capacity. And again, we're selling time. So if you only have 5 treatment rooms, you want to really optimize those treatments because if you don't do a good job of that, then in essence, it could be costing you a lot and not driving the level of revenue and profitability that you need to sustain.
Now, going back to your inspiration, you said that the travel industry was your inspiration for dynamic pricing and sort of this revenue management. Are there other things that you see different industries doing well that you think spa should be stealing?
To me, it's about making it as easy for the guest to engage. And not all guests are going to want to pick up the phone and talk for 25 minutes to book my spa day. So I think the easier you can make it for a guest to book when they want to at their convenience, the more they're going to spend and the more satisfied they'll be with the experience. It's a lot of work we're doing now with AI, which I think is exciting. That again is just going to ensure that a lot of those transactional things, I think there's a little bit of a paradox. A lot of operators think that guests just want to speak to you and make these bookings. If you can give them a way that they can self-serve and do those transactional bits, one thing is it frees up your staff to be more available, better hosts, right? Be there, not heads down doing these, or I've got a lineup of 4 people, the phone rings, and they pick up the phone. All of the things that we can do to allow technology to assist for a guest and for the staff, I think just makes things a lot easier and guests actually feel better served. So it's interesting.
So you mentioned that people think the guest wants to speak. What is the reality as you've interrogated that assumption?
Well, when you think of the emerging demographic, I think of my daughter, right? Mm-hmm. She's 21 and she would rather text me than talk to me on the phone. Mm-hmm. That's just her. But those digital natives, they've grown up with technology. Mm-hmm. They're used to just doing everything on their own. And now they come to a spa or a hotel, and all of a sudden it's like I'm calling room service manually, like speaking to somebody on the phone, or I'm having to call someone to book something. Well, they would rather just, it should be easy. I should just find a time, book it, and then I'm done. Apple Pay, whatever it is.
Feels almost rude that you're making me talk to someone.
Yeah, but there are the guests that want to be served that way. They want to ask all the questions. So if your team can be more available to serve that guest, and then all the other guests that are happy to use technology or even AI to book these things, I think you need to have an omni-channel strategy. It can't be one thing to all guests.
Mm-hmm. So I'm imagining there will be business owners that will resonate hearing your words with this, and they may have a finite budget. What do you think they invest in first? Is it the ability to receive text from the guests so that they're communicating fluidly in a channel the guest wants to? Is it self-serve booking? What is the highest leverage investment within that journey that you could see a small business making?
I'm going to sound self-serving because I work for a software company, but I think there are very cost-effective tech tools that actually let the smaller operator look like and act just like anybody that has a much bigger budget. Like technology can be that common denominator that just makes it much more accessible. Just like we were talking about for the guest, it also can make it much more accessible for the small operator to just have good technology that lets them do a lot of the automated things. They don't have to rely on humans to do those menial tasks, and it actually allows their team to be freed up to be better hosts, right?
Kind of equalizes with the Marriotts who may have a team that can answer the phones with all that.
Right. Well, and even there, you're seeing a lot moving to a lot of these digital channels, right? They know that's how some guests, and now we're getting to the point of most guests, would really prefer to be able to check in on their own, do their health form before they get to the spa. Because what's a more jarring experience than you get to the spa and now they want your complete health history? Whereas if I could have answered those questions pre-arrival, then that's done, put out of the way, and now I can focus on the experience.
As somebody that clearly spends a lot of time thinking about that guest journey, is there any surprising insight that you think wouldn't be intuitive to a small business owner that's in the weeds on that?
It comes down to friction, right? If there's a lot of friction in the digital experience, they might get frustrated. If you can eliminate those or really reduce them, the guests will feel served. You'll be able to handle that in a cost-effective way. That's just important to look at, right? Because you can't just think, well, we've always run it this way. I don't know if you were in the general session, but I loved, as she was talking about the Vanilla Ice versus Snoop Dogg, right? And how he's continued to evolve and just rethink, reimagine, reinvent himself, whereas others live in the past. We've always done it this way, right?
It's comfortable.
Yeah, it's comfortable. And so I think it's engaging the uncomfortable and seeing, can we make a breakthrough here that will help everyone involved, right?
Love that. I think we're approaching the end of our time together. I'd love to hear from you in your exceptional career. Who has been the mentor that has impacted you the most?
I've worked with so many amazing leaders, spa leaders, and
If you had to pick one,
yeah, I would say Lynn McNeese, president of iSpa.
what has she taught you?
Lynn has this way of elevating you as a leader to be better than you even think you can be.
How does she do that?
She really just creates an environment where we all learn from each other and we're respectful from each other's ideas, but that we come out of it unified. All my time on the board, over 15 years on the board, we never came out with a 50-50 vote. It was always unanimous. Now, there was always ideas and thoughts and discourse and everything else, but by the end of it, we always came out of it unanimous of we were going to do this or we weren't going to do this. And I think that's a powerful thing. And Lynn created that environment, but just her ability to push you to have your voice and have your voice heard. Yeah, she's a big inspiration to me.
How would you package that lesson for somebody that won't have the opportunity to ever engage with Lynn? How could they learn from sort of her genius?
You'll never see Lynn on stage, on main stage in our power sessions. She just always takes that back seat, but just really makes you a better version of yourself. I just think supporting people, supporting leaders, and helping them in that journey of just being the best version of themselves that they may not even realize is possible. So yeah, I've been very grateful for not just working with her all my time with iSpa and on the board, but as a real friend. She's an amazing person.
How about when you were coming up in ResortSuite? Was there a mentor that had an outsized impact on you there?
Yeah, before I started ResortSuite, I spent time at Ernst & Young, and I had a leader there that I worked under that created an environment with his employees that I thought was just incredible. His name was Gord Best. I always thought if I ever have a company of my own, that's that kind of team I want to create. That's how I want to support them. And so that was always an inspiration to me. And growing a team, I had employees, I was proud to say, that were with me for the whole time, 25 years. And that doesn't happen by accident. I think you create an environment with your team.
What's a habit that he did that you consciously were like, I'm going to make it a point to do this?
I always wanted everyone to be heard. Everyone's perspective was valuable. And you can never say the wrong thing. Even if it was wrong, he was trying to work through that.
How would he respond to it if it was the wrong thing? Like, how did he make that safe?
Let's unpack that. Like, let's talk about that and then why you think that. And then I want some others to voice why they think maybe that wouldn't be a good idea. But by the end of it, I think we all realized with gaining some of those additional dimensions, you can work through it and realize, okay, yeah, maybe I should have thought through that a bit more. But
so he didn't make you wrong.
Yeah.
He just interrogated it.
Yeah, you just work through it.
That's awesome. Well, I can't tell you how grateful I am for your time today.
Thank you,
It's
John.
been a pleasure, Frank. And I'm very much looking forward to a subsequent discussion on AI.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Just the insights that you've brought here today, I think will be powerful to a lot of people.